Right?
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. So glad that you could make it today, and this is pretty exciting. And big welcome to Eric Wowoh, or as we like to say, Eric Wowoh!
Whoa, 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 whoa!
So, obviously, if you didn't know where Liberia was before, obviously in the recent months, we've kind of figured out where it's at. But I want to give you just a little background about Liberia, and that's going to help make Eric's story even more powerful as we see how God has worked in him. Liberia was formed by former slaves from America, became the first independent country in Africa in 1847. But you know what? History is doomed to repeat itself. As we formed our new country, what did we do? We enslaved people. What happened in Liberia? The new ex-slaves that came there immediately made the locals there become their slaves. And so there was this tension for decades and decades until a civil war broke out that killed, conservative estimates, 1 in 8 Liberians, over 250,000 people murdered, slaughtered. You hear about children soldiers and barbaric acts, and you hear about that and you think, where does that happen? Well, it happened in Liberia. Now, Eric, I want to start your story with, you grew up in the kind of like Madison, the rural part of the country.
Yeah.
And just walk us through that day when you came back to your village.
Well, when the Civil War started in Liberia, I was around the age of 12. My age, by the way, is controversial because I don't have a birth certificate. I was never born in the hospital, and my mom and dad never went to school, so they couldn't read and write, and there was no hospital. So I was born literally in the village where there was no documentation. So up to today, I don't really know my actual age because my parents could not help me with that. But then I guess I was around the age of 12. Later on, I realized that. And before the war, life had never anything that I can remember. It was tough, even pre-war. There was no food, there was no education. We went hunting, as a bunch of 7-year-old, 5 years old, we went out to hunt for cards, for snakes, all kinds of stuff, whatever you can bring home to survive. And then the war came after that. So there was really nothing before the war. And then the war came, the little that was there was taken away as a result of the war. I went fishing one day. That's the shorter version of the story because it's a 20-year story. I'm just going to cut it short. Went out there with a bunch of friends to go fishing around the age of 12. On our way back home from the fishing trip, our village had been captured. And when the village was captured, we were asked to join the militias, the child soldiers. If you watch a movie called Blood Diamond, you have an understanding of what I'm talking about. But then my refusal to get enlisted led to a torture and beating. I was tortured, beaten, and left to die. And eventually God saved my life. And then never saw my parents from that age for almost 20 years. Crossed the border into Ivory Coast, the neighboring country, to Liberia, a French-speaking country. And I became a refugee that week.
Right, and I kind of want to transition because when I first heard your story back in February when I was in Liberia through the organization I go with, Hope to Liberia, and in fact Hope to Liberia works with Change Agent Network. We partner over there. Change Agent Network is all about building the community, but part of that is having schools for the children, and Hope to Liberia, our idea is to come in and give them clean water so they can be healthy enough to go to school. And I remember when I first heard your story, the thing that struck out to me, and I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, and I don't think we even talked about this, but I think of Joseph in the Bible. And there was a time when Joseph was free, and then he became a slave essentially in Egypt. He was a prisoner. And then at God's appointed time, he brought him out to do something bigger than he could have even ever imagined. And, I think when people think of a refugee camp, they're like, oh, it's some camp, not a bad thing. But, just recalling what we've talked about, I mean, it's a prison.
It's a prison. It literally is a prison, like a concentration camp. And you are fenced in, you are boxed in. And most times, I think what I remember is that people look at you as being retarded, being having mental health. We've not crazy people. It's just that you left your country. There's a civil war. You don't have a home, and you left your home. You're in a foreign country. You don't speak the language. There's a cultural barriers, there's cultural differences, and language barriers, and all of that. But then the people in this country look at you as somebody who is the enemy? You have a problem. That's why you are here. And then we got locked up in these fans for years, and you can't leave the camp without permission, and there was no education in the camp. The basic thing was a little bit of food, a little bit of water, a little bit of shelter, because we were constantly on the run for over a decade and a half, constantly on the run. You don't know where you're running to, but you know what you are running away from. And so it was just, that's the kind of life. And then we had to wait for food to come in from churches like you guys and people around the world to send food and water in the refugee camp. And you can dream about going to school or having a house. Or there was nothing like a dream in the camp. You just existed by faith. Trusting God that He would provide for you day by day. And that was what it was like. And we had people die in the camp. There was no hospital, no place to take them. And then you went to the hospital, you don't have money to pay your own hospital bill. So you literally die on the porch of the hospital, and you get buried. Parents back home, nobody heard about it.
You don't have money, you can't go in.
You can't go in, and you die right there.
Now let's talk about, because it was in the refugee camp where you became to know Christ. And I just want you to kind of briefly sort of tell us about that night.
Well, this is a personal thing for me. I never grew up in a Christian home, and we had no idea what Christianity was, because the people who brought Christianity to us in Liberia, I'm a native Liberian, did not present the real thing to us, So my parents were kind of hostile to that. Native Liberians did not want to do anything with Christianity. So we were more or less voodoo and juju people, black magic. We played with a lot of chime and oracles and ritual sacrifices of animals and other things. And that was where I grew up. And my mom and dad never taught me much about how those things work, how to pray, how to fast, grace and forgiveness. There was nothing like that until the war took place. And I left Liberia with a broken arm, and left to die at age 12, no parents around, and I'm in the refugee camp, and I know that God saved me, but I didn't know anything about that, so we just running and not knowing who is protecting us. So I arrived in Guinea Republic, which is another French-speaking country to Liberia, and it was around Christmas, 1992. I was in a refugee camp, and they gave us these tents. We live in tents, and there's dirt floor. You sleep on the dirt floor. They just bring a big bulldozer, clear the land, like 300 acres of land, and each person has a tent, and you are given a bucket, a spoon, and a plate, and a pot. That's it, and you get about 6 kilograms of food for the whole month. And then you have to bring your water containers to get water, because they got to supply water to water tankers. And that was once, maybe a month or twice a month. So Christmas was a good time to be in the refugee camp. And the reason for that was that it was only Christmas that we had the Catholics, the Methodists, the Lutheran, the Pentecostals, show up in the camp just for 2 weeks, all right? So it was always a party time around Christmas, and they show up from the 15th to the 30th of December, and then everybody disappear until 12 months again later. So it was that kind of time that we were excited to see who comes through the doors of the camp. So that was Christmas month, but that year, there was no food. The UN, the United Nations, to us, there's no food. The donors did not give us much this year to give to you guys, so there'll be no food. So we were really angry in the camp for the first time. So we have people talking about Jesus here and there, but we're not interested in paying attention, because how do you explain to that guy who lost everything that Jesus loves you, he cares about you, he has a plan for you, when he lost everything? There's no mom, no dad, out of country, on the run, none the way you're coming back home, there's no food to eat. And how do you really show that love of God? I don't know. So they didn't want to hear that. But there was few radical for Jesus, I would describe them, that would come into the camp, local pastors, and they would walk around and preach using bullhorns and loudspeakers. There's no congregation. There's nothing like, let's get to church and have coffee. There was nothing like that, So, and they would walk around in the camp of almost 50 to 60,000 people in Guinea, and they would just be preaching, God loves you, He cares about you. But that morning, it was around the 23, just before Christmas, and this man was preaching around 4 o'clock in the morning. And normally they would preach from 4 to 7, 3 hours of preaching. No specific person you're talking to. That's just whoever is listening to you. And the reason why they took that time is because that's the time that we are asleep. And we listening. We're supposed to listen around that time in the morning, because you have nothing going on. And there was nothing like public peace. So you are free to talk. So he started preaching, and he said one thing that got to me, and he said, I wasn't asleep. I'm lying down on the dirt floor, and I overheard him saying things like, how did you survive the Civil War in Liberia? If you can explain how you did that.
Right.
Where's your mom tonight? Where's your brother?
Right.
Where are your neighbors, your friends? Where's the government that you trusted?
Right.
Where's everybody at tonight?
Right.
As we get into the new year, Christmas is around the corner. How did you escape the war? How did you survive it? What did you do? What did you say? How fast could you run? How strong were you?
Right.
That made to save. That was real questions. I'm like, what is he talking about? So he went on and saying that, well, God saved you for a reason.
No.
That this was not because you were so smart
Right.
or you knew what to say. He saved you for a moment.
Right.
For this, that you will return home like Nehemiah's in the
Right.
scriptures to rebuild the 40 walls of your nation. But you keep running away from him, so he can't do much with your life until you make a U-turn. And he went on and he was asking questions like, how's that voodoo, whatever you believe, working out for you all
Right.
these years?
Right.
And the United Nations, how United Nations working out for
Yeah.
you as well? You've been stuck in the camp. So at that point, he just summarized the whole thing. He said, if you believe in everything I've just said, that you have no clue where you are headed with your life. You have no clue what's going on, and you want God to help you. I would like for you to close your eyes, wherever you are, and I will pray for you. You don't have to come out of your tent to see me. And I closed my eyes for the very first time ever in my whole family. And he prayed the sinner's prayer, and he said, I don't have a Bible to give you or a church to recommend to you, but find other Christians in the camp and hang out with them.
Right.
I never saw that man that day, and he never saw me, and he left the refugee camp. And I guess he went home thinking, what a waste of time. 3 hours of preaching, nobody got saved, nobody talked to me, but I got saved.
Right.
So that's how I came to know God. And ever since then, nothing has ever, just sitting here today, it's a fulfillment of that prophecy
Right.
in Madison.
Yeah. And you make a great point that we don't always realize what God is doing us and how He's using us to change the world, affect other people. And we sometimes, there's that old classic story about, the missionary goes to the village in Africa and then he only converts one person and he thinks it's a failure and he goes back home and, he's like, oh, it's a failure, I only converted one person.
Yeah.
And then that one person changes everything.
I'm sitting right here talking to you, all right?
Right. So now I think what's really just amazing, though, is, you get to Nigeria, you're in a refugee camp. I mean, you talk about, you're there, people, what do I have to live for? I barely have food to live on. I have no future. What's going to happen to me next? And you come up with an idea for a computer school.
Yeah, what happened literally was that 92, when I became born again, and they know what to do with grace and love and mercy and forgiveness and all of that. I didn't know what all those things were. But I kind of walk it. I literally walk it.
Yeah.
So I didn't experience it. I didn't have to read it from the book, live it literally. So what happened was we left Liberia without a passport, without ID, without visa, without anything at all.
Right.
We just left with our empty hands for the next 20 years, and that's how we left. So traveling from one country to the other was a big problem for us as refugees because you don't have identity.
Right.
So we end up going to jail in almost every country and every city that we show up because, like being in Madison, and you don't know anyone in Madison, and you can't even speak English properly. So what are you doing here?
They'll take you to the hospital.
What brought you here, boy? What are you doing around here? So you got to go to jail, and that's what happened. Literally, in all these African countries, we were thrown into jail. We were considered troublemakers, crazy people, and you stay in jail, and it took the grace of God to get released. So we decided we're going to leave Liberia and go further north, because the farther away we went from the trouble spot, the better life was. So we moved up north from Liberia towards Nigeria, which is about 4 countries away. So literally like one camp to the other camp, sleep on the way, pick up, beg for money, beg for food until you get there. So I arrived in Nigeria and then went back again to another refugee camp in Nigeria. But then I ran into this guy at church in Lagos. I was tired of the life that we live. 14 years, 10 years we've been gone. There's still no education, and they're talking about the war is going to come to an end. How are we going to go back to Liberia to rebuild a nation when we don't have any skills? We cannot read and write. We've been gone all these years. And you thinking that we, the generation, would build that country? It's never going to work. So I got tired and got out of the camp, met this guy at the strange church who was visiting, and I told him my problem. He didn't even know there were refugees in his own country. So I said, well, we have a refugee camp. So we talked, and he really was moved by the story. So he gave me a computer, one computer.
One computer.
One computer. So I started to learn how to use that computer in the refugee camp. I became Donald Trump in the camp overnight, because I'm the first guy to have a computer. I'm Donald Trump. I'm the richest man in camp.
You have a computer.
I got a computer. I got a laptop. A generator. So overnight, I learned how to use the computer. At this point, I'm becoming very conscious of my faith and what God expects of me. And I said, learning the computer after 3 weeks, I realized that to whom much is given, much is required. So by the stand of the refugee camp, I'm the richest man with a computer. So
Absolutely.
What is expected of man? You've been blessed to be a blessing. It's not to store it up. It's not to pot it up and make it bigger, but to impact lives. So I decided, okay, we're going to use this one computer to start training other refugees how to use it. And that was the beginning of Change Agent Network. So that one computer went, 3 years later, we had 17 computers, and then we were able to train about 700 students from different parts of Africa in that camp. And then eventually I had this vision that, you know what, all of this is great, but this is a transit point. It's like the rain is pouring down. We all run underneath the bus station. We are standing at the bus stop, and we're trying to take cover, waiting for the rain to stop so that we can get out. So that's the way I look at it. But what are we going to do back in Liberia when the Civil War eventually comes to an end? So I put up together a team of young men and women. And
from the refugee camp.
From the refugee camp. And I said, we got to head back to Liberia. We have job to do. We are the only people that can change our country.
Who still work with you today?
They still work with me today. That's about 13 years ago. So they headed back to Liberia, and then we went over there. We bought a piece of land, the Heart of Grace School, and we started building these things and started teaching most of the child soldiers, former fighters, about computer, and at the same time about the love of God that we've have experienced and the grace. What does that grace do? And even people that hurt some of us that we know, we started to love them. These are the people that cause the problem, but still go ahead and love them, because an eye for an eye makes the world goes blind, like what his name would say. So let's forget about that. Let's move forward. So that one computer today, one computer. And the good thing about that story that I always like to show is that the guy who gave that one computer have no idea that we are talking about that one computer today here in Madison. And he has no idea that we have gone ahead and built 14 schools and have a lot of people go back and forth that one computer. And for him, it was just like, well, it's just an old computer. I don't have use for that. You can have it. Again, like the pastor in the camp, this is one computer. So that's how we got started. And then the guys went to Liberia. They are in Liberia right now. All of the leadership from that refugee camp, we still remain together, work together as a team, and they're doing a great job. So we built several schools around the country, over 3,000 kids or more, being trained every day in computer, in technology. But this is the deal. Change Agent Network is an organization that we want to serve as a bridge. Okay, that's the mission, is to serve as a bridge between our minds and our hearts, because there's a disconnect between our minds. Your mind doesn't become born again, it's your heart that becomes born again. So your mind is something you have to constantly deal with, because today you are up here, tomorrow you're in the middle, and the next day you don't even know what you're doing. So in Africa, the reason why we have so much poverty is because the people are not educated. They don't have the information they need to be able to transform their own lives in third world countries. But guess what? They have a good heart in the midst of that. They have a heart to change their community and a heart for opportunity, for education for their kids. But the mind is not developed. And that's what the Americans have, the Western world have. They have the mind. Over there, you find a lady with 10 kids. None of them in school, no food to eat, no house, but she got a smile on her face. And then you come to America, where they have all of the education, the information, the knowledge, but then people are suffering from depression. And they are unhappy. And so when I came to America, I started to think about that. What's going on? How come here this guy has nothing, and all he wants is the basic things? He doesn't have it, but he's happy. ready to go to church for 3 hours,
Right.
nonstop.
Right.
Ready to sleep in the church, nonstop. And this guy here with practically everything,
Right.
he's not happy. What's going on?
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, we have to build a bridge. This is not about you coming to Africa to build a school and make yourself feel good
Right.
and feel,
Right.
that self-gratification. It's really about what do you walk away with from these people. They have a story to share. How is that story going to impact your life for your checkbook and for the education?
Right.
Here in America, my mission here is not to build schools. It's
Right.
not to build orphanage homes. My mission here is to share a story, a compelling story that makes somebody to say, you know what, I don't have that heart. I want to have that same heart.
Right.
And then I give you a little bit of my story, you give me a little bit of your mind. Let's educate these people so they can live a good life. That's why there's so much
Right.
prosperity in America.
Right.
Because people know how to think. They know how to do businesses. So the technology, they have everything. So wealth is everywhere. And now if we really want to help the poor, it's to give them knowledge.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's why we
absolutely.
took education as the key. And you know what? The good thing about education is that when you die, nobody takes it away from you.
Right.
Okay, it's not a gift that somebody can put you at a gunpoint and say,
Right.
hey, let me have your brain. Let me
Right.
know what you know. No, it's never going to happen. So you know what? That's the true gift. It's not about a handout. It's a hand up.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
To empower them
Right.
so that they can help themselves and help others.
Yeah. And, you make just to kind of reemphasize, you make the great point that, and we've talked about this before, that, in Africa, there might be, poverty of things, but in America, we struggle with a poverty of the mind.
The mind, yeah.
That we let everything else crowd out what heart we could have.
Give me
for
the
others.
number, put it in the box. We are just fascinated with boxes all over the world. We go from the house, which is a box, the car, which is the house, the office is another box, and we divide things up into
Right.
this stuff. And what I'm saying, that's what caused the civil war in Liberia. They tried to put people in this little
Right.
thing. So I'm saying, okay, let's break it down,
Right.
and let's see what's going on in the room. Let's hear what's happening in Liberia, what's happening in Madison,
Right.
what's happening in Louisiana.
Now, I want to definitely make sure we have a little time to talk about, Ebola. And, unfortunately, of course, including the kids that go to the Change Agent Network schools, they're not allowed to go to school right now. All the schools are closed in the country. Yet, though, I loved it that, the teachers at your schools, they're still getting paid.
Oh, yeah,
It's
they
not
get-
their fault that the kids can't come to
It's
school.
not their fault.
Right.
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 Ebola is a serious issue, and I had a little discouragement just a few months ago when it started. I was in Liberia to June. I just got out 2
Yeah.
weeks later before
Right.
it became very serious. Ebola is not a decision you make to have. It's a disease.
Right.
All right? And whether you like it or not, and it's not respected of people or status.
Yep.
It kills everybody. It kills doctors,
Yep.
So, hey, who else can I kill?
Right.
Kill the doctors. So that's the way I look at it. But then what really discouraged me from the beginning was that after we built all these schools for almost 13, 14 years, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of sacrifices, and then Ebola showed up. And all the schools got shut down nationwide.
Right.
The whole country is at a standstill.
Right.
Okay, nobody going to work, nobody doing businesses, no food coming in. You can't leave Madison to go to Louisville.
Right.
Nobody don't
Right.
like to
Right.
go.
Right.
Everybody quarantined in their community. Now think about that happening here just for one day. Nobody driving out of town.
It'd be chaos.
It'd be chaos, okay? And that's what's going on nationwide.
Right.
And think
Right.
about if Ebola was on your street, moving from house to house,
Oh, yeah.
it would be a state of emergency, right?
Oh, yeah.
It would be a state of emergency. Guys, get up. We got to do something. And that's exactly what's going on in Liberia. It's a state of emergency.
Right.
Nobody's traveling. And as you go to the hospital, there's no hospital.
Yeah.
Okay? So
Yeah.
now if you have a headache, he got Ebola. If you have typhoid, he got Ebola. If you have malaria, you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
Ebola. Whatever you got, you got
It's
Ebola.
Ebola.
So you know what? It's just confusing. So I was heartbroken from the beginning 2 months ago. I'm like, Lord, what is this? We worked hard for over 13 years. Things were just beginning to pick up after 14
Right.
years of civil war.
Right.
And now we have this thing show up. No electricity, no running water, no hospital, no education. Now we have to deal with Ebola. So what are we going to do? And it became personal to me, and it's still personal to me because my mom, my whole family live out there.
Right.
Okay, and
Right.
we have several thousands of kids in different parts of the country. We lost 2 teachers already
Right.
as a result of this. Now they can't go to work. They don't have food to eat. No, so we are the hope.
Right.
So my phone rings every time. Eric, you are in America. What are you telling these people? Are they sending help? What are they doing? And sometimes it's very hard to explain that to people out here about the need over there.
Yeah.
So we continue to pay the teachers even though they are not working.
Right.
And we have about 200 teachers just in 2 schools.
Yeah.
Taking care of over 3,000 kids. So we can say, like the government, that we're not going to pay you because you are not working.
Right.
Okay, that's not Christ's love.
Right.
Okay, real love means, what do you work on that? We're going to take care of it because this is not your fault. So I have to be here to do that, and we started shipping medical supplies, food to Liberia. We have shipped our container. We have another container going this coming weekend. But my job is to reach out to the Americans and say, you know what, we can fix this. In America, we live naturally in a quarantine environment.
Right, oh yeah.
Okay, we have our little separate houses, and maybe we have 2 people living in one house. It's easy to control that. Not in Africa, where you have 15, 20 persons living in one household. And then if your sister is sick with Ebola and you are not allowed to touch them, think about that for a moment. Your son, a loved one is sick, and you can't touch the person. You can't talk to them. You can't be with them under the same roof.
Right.
How does that feel? And most Africans don't understand that because they're like, what do you mean I can't touch my child? You know, I would touch this child, and then it spreads from there.
Right.
And that's because the reason why Liberia had been at the top of the whole thing is that it's because of lack of education. There was 14 years of civil war, 2 decades.
Right.
People never had education. Now, if you have a flyers that talks about, how to prevent Ebola, how to, take care of yourself. How are they going to read that information? They can't read, you know. So they don't have television, they don't have radio. And it's kind of hard, when you talk to the Americans, like, well, maybe the way we live here, that's the way everybody else lives in the world. That's not true. It's not the way everybody else lives in the world. Here in America, you have a remote control. 300 channels you can flip to anyone. You get in the car, there's a radio talking to you. You get at the office. So it's easy for us to say, well, maybe, why can't they just stop this thing? They can just stop it.
Yeah.
It's not just that simple.
Right.
So it's still hard for me right now to travel around to raise money to pay teachers' salary and shift money to buy food because there's no food.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think, we were talking yesterday, just like Romans 8:28, God works all things, not some things, not just this or that. He'll take Ebola, and he'll make it something good. And, we obviously, just like, when you were in that refugee camp, you perhaps couldn't see, hey, I'm going to be here today.
Yeah, be in Madison, right?
Right.
Really?
Right. But
how are you going to get there?
Yeah, exactly. But we know that God, is in control, and we know that, He obviously cares for Liberia. And I think there's opportunities, for us to be involved and to care. And, I think that the key is, sometimes it's very difficult. We see things on the TV and we just think that's far off. That doesn't affect us, And honestly, I think what happens is when you get your boots on the ground, and you're looking at a child whose parents are gone, that is wearing the same outfit every single day because that's the only outfit that he has, and, has a runny stomach, diarrhea as we like to call it, because he has no clean water. I think when you can see that child, when somebody physically can see, that's when they can connect.
What I tell people all the time is that your comfort zone is a destroyer of your destiny.
Right.
Okay, because when you sit in there, you become comfortable. You know what a remote control is. You know what a fridge is. You know what a microwave is. And you know where to park your car, the driveway. And Walmart is down the street, and Albertson, and self-checkout. So you get to that point where you don't see anything outside of that perimeters of that wall. So what I'm saying is that you really want to be able to have an impact. You have to at some point step out of the boat. It's like Peter. Would water walking 3 a.m. in the morning. That's one of the greatest things ever happened. He went water walking, but he was willing to step out to see the world for where.
Out of his comfort zone.
Yeah, out of his comfort zone. God created a world. He didn't create a community. He didn't create a house. He created a whole world. About 7 billion people live in the world. In America, only comes from about 320 or 50,000 people out of 7 billion. All right, so there's a lot more to the world than we have. And he said, have dominion. You take control and determine what happened on the face of the earth. Okay, that's a big responsibility to have.
Right.
But then we said, no, we don't want the whole world. We want this. All right? So anything else coming in,
Right.
we're not open to it.
Right.
Okay? So my thing is that Ebola kind of helped me in a way and helped all of us in Liberia for the first time. Most Americans are just getting to know that
Right.
Liberia is a stepchild of that of America.
Yeah.
They didn't know Liberia was a
Right.
stepchild,
Right.
So they're getting to know that, and they get on the phone and call me, hey, Eric,
Right.
what's going on in Liberia? I mean,
Right.
why can't you guys get this thing under control? Like, hey, really? You gotta help me here. And I gotta tell people that, that Ebola has a bad side and a good side.
Yeah.
The good side, and that's where I get my comfort from.
Right.
It's like being here this morning, talking to all of these people, all of you in this room, wonderful
Yeah.
people in the room, and say, this is what it is.
Right.
And for some people for the first time, who never was interested in education, never knew about anything in Liberia, now
Right.
I begin to develop interest for the first
Right.
time and say, what can I
Right.
do to help?
Right.
I
Right.
want to come to Liberia.
Right.
I want to
Right.
help people with education. I want to help with water. I want to
Right.
help with that. So
Right.
it has brought some light to the situation, a generational problem that we have had to deal with for almost 200 years. And most Americans don't even know the connection between Liberia
Oh, yeah.
and the United
Yeah.
States. So this is bringing everything to light, and that's the good thing.
Yeah.
So I look at that, I'm like, God, you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to take a leap of faith every step, day by day. I don't see the end from the beginning,
Right. Right.
but I am going to take a leap of faith and trust you with this. And that's what this mission is all about. It's about that trust. You can believe something and don't trust it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
There's a difference between the two.
Right.
So it's not just believing, but trusting it. But think about this. Think about if all of us in this room had what we want in the world. You have everything you need, you don't need me. You have everything you need, you don't need me. I have everything I need, I don't need you. What an awful world
Right.
that would have been.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we experienced that already.
Yeah.
So the purpose of sharing is to build a community, okay? And that's the model we have in Liberia, is to build a community up. It's not, okay, I don't need you either, I got me.
Right.
It's never happened. And that's
Right.
not the way God meant the world to live. It meant the world to live as a community, where if I don't have food, I can come to you, and you don't have certain things, you come to. So in Liberia, that's the way we live, because we don't have much to go around to everybody, so we live by that communal spirit. If you're getting married, I got to come to your wedding. I got to support your wedding. If you have somebody die, we have to come and bury that person, mourn together, live together.
Right.
But then when you leave that and come outside, like to the United States and most Western world today, the community is gone.
Right.
There's no more community.
Yeah.
It's just individual doing individual things. The success story is based on individual strength.
Right.
It's no longer the community.
Right.
Even in the church, it's no longer like, okay, we're going to stand together
Right.
because we are into
Right.
this together.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Well, Eric, I tell you, I really appreciate you coming
Yeah.
today. And, I'm so glad you're able to share our story,
Right.
your story, with all of us.